Welcome to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. If you've not been here before, usually this is just a channel for my own personal music project. I thought I'd do some videos on just some general chit chat about music in general, and just kind of my thoughts on certain topics. So today I'm talking about a controversial one. It always causes a ruckus on social media whenever somebody's posting about these guys and this record, and it's the Black Album by Metallica, or really, it's the self-titled album Metallica, um, released in 1991, as everyone probably knows by now. Uh, Look, it's one of those records that kind of changed the landscape for music. It changed things for metal in particular. It brought metal to the forefront in a way that opened a lot of doors for a lot of acts to go places and do things that they probably wouldn't have been able to do before that. And there was definitely a perception, I think, from a lot of people that metal, couldn't be catchy. It couldn't be anything but kind of full speed ahead all the time, with lyrics and vocals that a lot of people probably couldn't understand. So Metallica's Black Album gets a lot of flack because it is catchy, it is popular, to say the least. The album still sells like 1 million copies a year or something like that to this day. It's insane, like the reach of it. And you're talking about hundreds of millions of copies, I think, worldwide altogether. Now it's like 200 million copies or something ridiculous. It's insane. It's up there in terms of its effect on popular culture with like albums like The Wall, Pink Floyd's The Wall. Um, you know, uh, it stands up with literally like music that kind of, as I said, changed the world. And like I said, in the metal community, it takes a lot of flack. So I wanted to make the case for why I think the Black Album still, irrespective of people's personal thoughts and feelings, why it objectively still stands as a metal masterpiece, and not just a popular record or a rock masterpiece. It still stands as a metal masterpiece. Now, let's make it clear from the outset. If you were to ask me which album I think is kind of the epitome of Metallica's career, hands down, it's Master of Puppets. There's no question, there's no doubt. Overall, Master of Puppets has the right mix of ingredients, songwriting wise, in terms of pacing, in terms of I think what a big signature of their sound was the kind of epic kind of live sound. A certain amount of like things, like certain ingredients like dual guitar harmonies, the quality of the solos, the overall pacing of the record, and the kind of atmosphere and the lyrics. All of those elements needed to come together, and I think Master of Puppets kind of hits the nail on the head with all of those. There is one problem with Master of Puppets, and you could argue that it has a slightly dated sound. It sounds definitively 80s, which for a metal fan isn't a big deal. That's not a problem. It's timeless for the metal fan, but for the general music consumer, you could argue that it has a slightly dated sound. So that aside, the Black Album, the reason why I think it stands is, first off, there's, let's go through the songs, right? And we'll talk about each one, if I can remember the song order. So obviously you've got the album opener, Enter Sandman. And Enter Sandman is probably the song that takes the most crap from a lot of people because it's the most played song on the record. You'll find it these days. Obviously, it's streaming, but for those of us who grew up with the record when it launched, it was being played back to back on radio stations, all day, every day. No matter what you turned on, at some point you were going to hear that song, and a lot of others actually from this record as well. Like this record had ended up spawning so many hit singles. It's ridiculous. Like uh, just the right timing, more than anything else. They made the right record for the right time. There's a lot of luck involved in that, in that sort of monumental success. Otherwise, this just would have been another metal record. Had it been made 5 years later or 5 years earlier, I think this would have just been another metal record. People, wouldn't have been ready for it, so to speak. When you're talking about the general masses, metal fans, yeah, would probably still have consumed the record, and it may have been considered, historically looking back, in a better light because it wasn't played to death. Anyway, Enter Sandman. It's got this catchy hook. There's a couple of really cool things about it. I mean, the actual riffs themselves are really cool. There's the Sleep with One Eye Open bit, where it's kind of played on like a semi-clean guitar passage, this sort of arpeggiated chord form. And it kind of shifts key just heading into the chorus. There's some nice delicate kind of guitar work there, nailing the main riff, the da 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 da. That there's actually a lot of feel and touch involved with that. I know a lot of people who can play Enter Sandman, like any old kid can play it, but I know very few people who can actually play that so it sounds legit. So there's more than meets the eye to that riff, but the lyrics and the atmosphere that it generates is actually kind of cool. So if you think about it, it's kind of about your internal demons and your nightmares, and essentially looking over your shoulder. You're sleeping with one eye open. You're always you're restless, and you have these demons, these fears, these things that kind of haunt you, and they keep you up at night. And there's something kind of dark and cool about that. Prior to that, Metallica mostly wrote about, or made it sound like they were writing very much about external things. Like James Hetfield has talked about on the Metallica album, starting to write kind of introspectively, write about, thoughts and feelings and things that anyone can identify with. And the truth is, he was already doing that. Master of Puppets, like, it sounds a little external, but there's clearly things about addiction and things like that in there, and control and all of that sort of thing. It's just phrased differently, and I think for some fans, they maybe prefer that. There's a complexity to his lyrics between, well, on Puppets and Justice. There's a complexity to them, and a command of vocabulary that is quite impressive. It must be said. Where the Black Album, things are much simpler. And that's not for everyone, but I think it works. I just think it's a different flavor of Metallica. Probably the biggest argument against the song is just that it's very backbeaty. The drums are very backbeaty. There's no driving double bass. It's not up tempo, that sort of thing. But it's catchy as fuck. And there's nothing wrong with the song being catchy and having great hooks. The tempo itself actually isn't that slow. It's just there's no double timing, there's no 16th notes, there's nothing like that, just to really kind of push the feel of the song into that range of feeling up tempo from a metal perspective. But that being said, there's loads of metal bands that we treasure, like the likes of Black Sabbath, for instance, and even Maiden, right? There's plenty of songs of theirs that aren't necessarily like really rapid songs, right? And there's loads of examples from the kind of 70s and 80s of bands that aren't particularly fast but are still heavy and still cool. And I think like Sandman is a good example of that kind of thing. And so Sad But True. Sad But True is like a slow, grinding, heavy, down-tuned thing. And prior to this stage, there weren't a lot of people doing down-tuning. That was kind of a new thing that was just starting to bubble under. In fact, probably the only other examples that were like really known for it was already Sabbath. Sabbath were already down tuning. And oddly enough, Soundgarden. I remember reading the guitar magazines, Guitar World and stuff like that around that time. And it was Kim Thale from Soundgarden, the guitarist. He was always the guy getting quizzed about drop tuning and odd tunings and things like that. But it wasn't super common in metal. It was only just starting to bubble up in the underground. So Sad But True was one of those tracks that a lot of people heard and kind of spawned a load of bands that decided to drop tune because they were like, wow, that sounds just so killer, so heavy. Um, and Sad But True is, again, it's another example where the song wasn't intended to be a single, and then later in the album's life and cycle, the momentum was still going, to everyone's surprise. And Sad But True was like a fan favorite. It started to emerge as a fan favorite. Um, Always got a good reaction being played live, all that kind of thing. So then that became another single later on, and consequently got played a lot. And again, I think that put some people off retrospectively looking back at the record because just got sick of hearing it. But it's a great song. It's got some real creepy sounding guitar stuff. The quote U2 approach that Bob Rock kind of suggested, I guess, to Hetfield and Hammett, that it would do this thing in the chorus with the other guitar part, where it's got this kind of eerie, screechy thing that's going on in the background. But it's that kind of stuff that's really sonically. It's those little touches that really make the record work. Um, but yeah, just really slamming, really heavy. Again, it's about, the lyrics kind of touch upon looking at yourself in the mirror and not liking what you see, essentially, for all kinds of reasons, for your weaknesses and your flaws and that kind of thing. And being, again, controlled by your demons, I suppose, is a good way to look at that song. And then the third track on the album, which just for me is still one of the highlights, particularly because the other, the big hits have been kind of overplayed. But one of the ones that I'm always prepared to listen to is Holier Than Thou. And interestingly enough, that was originally supposed to be selected as a single for the record. That was the one that Bob Rock thought was the catchiest. And Lars Ulrich was the guy who made the call, like, no, it's Sandman. It's got to be Sandman. And credit to Lars, like, he was right. Looking back at it, like, that crazy little Danish guy, sometimes he's got good instincts and intuitions. But Holier Than Thou I think, is a great song. Like, it's up tempo, it's kind of slamming and pounding, and it's got a cool verse riff. It's got cool lyrics. Like, it's aggressive. It has a bit of conflict in it. Like, there's moments where it's basically James Hetfield literally calling people. He's calling people on their hypocrisy and calling people on their bullshit. And there's a point in the lyrics where he even addresses them directly, like, "Who the hell are you?" Who the hell do you think you are, basically? And just levels accusation at people because they judge before they know you or know anything about you. And that could be at the press, it could be at general people, whatever it is, whatever his perspective is. That doesn't have to be your perspective. You take away what you need to from the lyrics. And it's got that really cool riff, with the dual guitar harmonies, and a kick-ass solo that follows that. And it's one of my favorite solos from Kirk Hammett. One of his best examples of a wah-wah solo as well. Then you got the Unforgiven, and then you get the more introspective moment, and it's a bit more ballady. Fantastic solo, like one of the most memorable rock guitar solos in history, if you ask me. And kudos to Bob Rock for getting that out of Kirk, because the original solo, for anyone who's seen the making of the record, was, pretty atrocious. But yeah, a great song. Again, it's probably been overplayed, but I kind of like the gunslinger thing about it. I think that's kind of cool. And whereas Load and Reload maybe go a bit too bluesy and a bit too country and western, the Unforgiven actually walks a nice balance of having some of those elements, which are clearly part of James Hetfield's kind of musical influences and upbringing. He's got a bit of that in there, clearly. But this kind of walks that line where it has that nice kind of almost, classical feel to the guitar parts, the clean guitar parts, and the vocal melodies and stuff like that. That kind of carries over from Puppets and even Ride the Lightning. And yeah, although it's a slower and ballady kind of song, let's be honest, they had a track 4 that was always kind of slow and ballady on every record since Ride the Lightning. The difference with The Unforgiven is it doesn't have that kind of faster climax towards the end. Typically, they would finish those sorts of songs. They would ramp up the tempo towards the latter stages of one of those songs. As an example, if it was Fade to Black or One or whatever it was, um, and Sanitarium, for example. And they didn't really do that this time. They kind of just stayed in that tempo. And yeah, that's fair enough. You can, as a metal fan, you can level that criticism, and I wouldn't take it away from you. But as any other listener on the fringes of metal and in the rock world, that wouldn't pose a problem. So the song still holds up, if you ask me. Then you've got Wherever I May Roam, again, a song that's really overplayed. But if it wasn't overplayed, that's still a great song. Some really, really cool stuff at the beginning of the song with the kind of 12-string bass, and the sitar, really atmospheric. There's a darkness to the record and the ambience of the record that I think is just, it's really, really, really amazing. And it's probably the main thing, I think, that kind of aided. That's what Bob Rock brought, right? Lots of people made the argument that Bob Rock changed the band, but he clearly didn't. If you've heard the demos, the songs are very much as they were. The only thing Bob Rock did was go, in the demo, that song's just played a bit too fast, like you're rushing it. Just get it in the pocket, get the tempo like bang, on the mark. And added the little flourishes and things like that, and he got the sound. He managed to squeeze that massive crunching sound through two speakers. He tried to basically get what they were trying to do on Injustice, to have the guitars have real cut and clarity and bite, and yet still have the full bottom end and thump of the bass, and have that nice live drum sound rather than the kind of dry duck 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 kind of sound on Injustice. So it's kind of like what they had been trying to do all along. But they didn't have the technical skills to pull it off, and he did. And he did that through clever arrangement. So like one of the main things he did was stop Jason Newsted from playing exactly what James was playing. And that opened up space, and that allowed them to do things in the mix and have the bass be fatter in tone. But yeah, there would still be space in the mix. And one of the things I had to do was make sure that the guitars cut through frequency-wise, because they were going to have to turn them down level-wise. And I think they struck a really good balance, and it holds up really well today, even to this day. I mean, there's so many people who base their reference mixes and masters still. They would use the Black Album as a reference. Go like, they want that meaty, full sound, but still have the kind of cut, the clarity, and the punch. And anyway, Wherever I May Roam, it's cool because it shows a different side as well. It shows that kind of, it's like an introspective on the relentlessness of their world at the time with the touring and just pushing on and pushing on and pushing on and pushing through it, and the cost that has, in terms of like lost relationships and it can be with anyone. That doesn't have to be with like, I don't know, wives or girlfriends or anything like emo like that. That's just with general family. And I can say from my perspective, like, that stuff is true. That stuff happens to people. That is the cost. Being a touring musician that has to just gig relentlessly, that comes at a price. There's a song that Michael Arkfeld from Opeth appears on, and I think it's on the Dream Theater's record. Can't remember which one. And yeah, there's this quote where he talks about like not turning up for a family member's birthday or wedding or something like that, or they asked him to play the wedding or something, and he was too chicken shit to do it because he had to like, I guess, keep the image of the front man of the death metal band, or something like that. But yeah, it's clearly there's musicians who have a lot of regrets, about their lifestyle, even when they're successful. I remember the song that came after Wherever May Roam. It's Don't Tread on Me. Great guitar parts. It's more up tempo. There's some proper metal going on here. Again, it's kind of got the dual guitar parts, dual harmony type parts. The vocal harmonies. Sorry, that's the vocal harmonies I wanted to touch on. The vocal harmonies in the in the chorus that, you know, so be it, settle the score, that sort of part. Like, that's a fucking cracking vocal work from Hetfield. And that's probably one of the main things you need to touch on this record, is that, like, the vocal work, it's clearly stand out. It's leaps and bounds ahead of any other Metallica record, even to this day. There's nothing that can touch it. Um, what Bob Rock managed to get out of Hetfield it's just incredible. But clearly it wasn't sustainable. You know, he blew out his voice, and there was a lot of fallout from that, which is a great shame, because what a fantastic sound. So yeah, he paid for it, but he worked his ass off on it, and it shows, and you can hear it. And yeah, I would love to see a record again where they kind of had both those elements, the kind of pacing, say, of a Master of Puppets, with the vocal performance that you kind of heard on the Black record, and the kind of the production style and recording quality and that sort of thing, but like brought up to modern standard. I think that would be just the perfect Metallica record. Um, and then yeah, like I said, as you go towards the back end of the tail end of the record, you've got Through the Never. Through the Never is a good example of one of the more up tempo songs. It's got a bit of like double bass drive about it. It's really not that slow tempo. It's just in the pocket, and that's cool. Like, that is a legit full on awesome sounding metal song. Now, of course, you've got Nothing Else Matters, which is like the most ballady song on the record. And again, the main problem with this song, it's yeah, I know for some people, like, they don't want any ballads on their records, and that's fine. I understand that, and that's why I say, like, on balance, like, Puppets would still be the best record. But um, it is still a very good song. It's just, again, completely overplayed. But look, it's one of those things. They were starting to change a little bit, clearly, and you know, it is a good song. It is good lyrics. The solo from James Hetfield in particular, I think, is a standout moment in terms of melodic prowess. The note selection is fantastic. You know, it's just the right amount of notes and for the right length, and everyone shuts up behind him just enough. You know, it's a good balance. And that song, yeah, it takes a lot of flack. But I don't think it's really deserved. But I can also understand why it's not everyone's cup of tea. And then towards, like I said, right towards the back end, you've got My Friend of Misery. I think that's a great song as well. It just has a nice kind of groove, and it's starting to ramp up the back end of the record again. And Newsted's, you know, bass part from the beginning of that is, yeah, one of the best contributions to the band that he ever made. And I really like, again, the sort of misery loved company, that whole theme about people, I guess, getting, you know, stewing in their own fucking juices of their own demise or something like that. There's something kind of cool about that and pretty dark. And then one of my favorites, again, standout favorites, is The God That Failed. I really like the topic of the lyrics. I like how James Hetfield deals with it. I like the riff. Really, really like that. And the you know, it's really cool. Fantastic guitar solo where Kirk just hits some fucking spectacular notes through it. And I love the chorus. Again, vocal work on that is just fantastic. And then lastly, you got The Struggle Within. And The Struggle Within, again, is an underrated song. It's nice and up tempo. It kicks some ass, you know. And they don't play it live nearly enough. Although maybe it's too challenging, I don't know. But they've played it a few times, I know. But I'm yet to hear a really good example of them playing it. But that, again, it's a fantastic record, and I like how it kind of abruptly closes the record off, and it's got one of the best solos I've heard from Kirk Hammett as well, in terms of just sounding frenetic, but also sounding well composed. And yeah, it's just got some cool riffs, just that, you know, that sort of double stop stuff, and very precise and tight, and it's kick-ass, man. So yeah, there we go. That's my case for the Black record and why I think it's still a metal masterpiece. You know, it's still got a lot more pace than a lot of metal acts have that have total credibility. Um, the sound of the record that Bob Rock got from those guys, like in terms of production sound and the little touches and flourishes, the vocal performances, the solos. Yeah, you can argue that maybe they're not as technically complex, but I wager that they are. It's just in a different way. You know, some of Kirk's older solos, the parts that you think sound complicated aren't actually that hard. And then there's other parts that would be harder than you imagine. But sometimes it's a lot harder to nail the feel when there's more space between the notes, when you've got to like really nail the bends and really nail the vibrato and hit the pinch harmonics just right, because there's so much space that if you cock up any one of those things, there's no hiding it. So I think it's some of Kirk's best work. In fact, I would argue that it probably is his best work alongside everything he did between Puppets and Injustice. There's some great stuff on Injustice as well. But the Black Album, I think, just raises it to another level. It's just not all fast. And that's the main argument, I think, is popularity and the overall tempo just not quite being just as high-paced in terms of like the drum arrangements. That's people's main arguments against the record. And yeah, I don't think they're always warranted. I think the truth of it is, on balance, you know, it's a fantastic record. It just got so overplayed. So many of the songs, like Sandman was a hit, Sad But True was a hit, Nothing Else Matters was a hit, Unforgiven was a hit, and Wherever I May Roam was a hit. So it was like 5 hit singles off of that. Anyway, yeah, look, I'm gonna park it there. I'll talk more records from different bands at a different time. I chose this one because I thought it would be a bit inflammatory, to be honest. I know there's going to be people who like hate the record in the comments and give me shit for it and all that. That's cool. That's fine. I welcome it. And if you happen to listen to any of my stuff while you're here, even if you don't like it, I don't really mind. But that's cool. You know, and I'll try to do more videos like this in the future. Right, I got to run to work. Catch you guys later, and hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, subscribe, give it a thumbs up, that sort of thing. And if you didn't, spew hate in the comments. I don't care. Right, take it easy. See you later.